to ask questions, give us feedback, and you'll do it through your phone or old school analog. You can just take your hand and say it verbally. But the Mentimeter app, or is it an app? Anyway, the Mentimeter program, which you access through the QR code, is going to allow you to do that. So cool. Are we, Justin, are we good? Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. Let me get over here so I'm near the mic and you can hear me. Everyone hear me okay? I feel like a star with all these phones pointed up. Luckily, it's not at me though. Okay. So let me start by introducing my organization and then also our subconsultant reinvestment fund, just to kind of give you kind of a who we are before we dive into the work that we will be doing. So we are at GOPC, which is slightly easier to say than the Greater Ohio Policy Center. We are a nonprofit research and policy organization that champions revitalization in the state of Ohio. I have a bipartisan staff and board, and we do original research. We do mission consistent consulting to local communities, of which this project is an example. We do peer learning, and also we do advocacy at the State House. You can see pictures of my colleagues talking to our legislators. So one of our overarching concerns at GOPC is making sure that Ohio's legacy cities and places have a state policy environment in which local leaders can work unimpeded, and that local leaders are aware and have access to the best tools that are out there. And that is what our charge is here, is to help you all identify tools and strategies. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a second. Joining me today are the two staffers who are going to be working most intensively on this project. And I want to introduce them. So my colleague Erica Spade-Patras is our research director at GOPC, and Javine Davis is our research associate. And you will be seeing emails from them. You'll be getting phone calls from them through the life of this project. As we're about to discuss, a large part of this project relies on fine-grained quantitative data. And so we at GOPC have been lucky enough to bring on board the Reinvestment Fund as a sub-consultant. The Reinvestment Fund is a national expert that has years of experience analyzing and developing models of real estate markets that help local governments and others make data-driven decisions about the investments that they're going to make. So Mike, I'm going to have you pop up here for a second and introduce Reinvestment Fund. Is that cool? Okay, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of what to expect over the next few months.
Morning, everybody. I'm Mike Norton. I'm Chief Policy Analyst at Reinvestment Fund. And for those of you who are not familiar with what Reinvestment Fund is, which wouldn't be surprising that many of you don't know, we are a national CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution that's based in Philadelphia. We're one of the largest CDFIs in the country. Our primary lending activities are to support affordable housing, supermarket access, childcare facilities, mixed use, commercial redevelopment, and we do this work sort of all over the country. My colleague Colin Whiting, who is here with me today, and I are part of our policy solutions group within Reinvestment Fund, and we typically collaborate with our internal lending teams and with our external stakeholders to develop analytics and strategies to identify places where you can expect the greatest impact for investments. And then in places where we've been really active over a long period of time, we'll develop methodologies to assess the impact of our investment activity in these places over time. And so we do this work all over the country and collaborate with folks such as yourselves in developing frameworks for understanding the prevailing conditions of the real estate market across the entire region and how they vary from place to place at a very sort of fine-grained geography that we'll be talking a little bit more about today. But I'm going to let Allison sort of walk us through the high-level sort of overview of the engagement itself, and then there's going to be plenty of time for those of you who are able to stick around and talk in real detail about sort of how the methodology is going to hang together as we get along. Thank you today.
Great. Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, so turning to the project itself, let me start with the bottom line up front, which is that we will be developing, in collaboration with you all and under the direction of Eastgate, we're going to be developing a strategy that makes data-driven recommendations to best meet the variety of housing opportunities and needs in Mahoning and Trumbull counties. And this is just to give you a sense, this is the areas that we are prioritizing in our research, but to be clear, we are looking at entire county sort of wide trends as well as trends happening in individual cities. And we are going to be spending some time looking specifically at Youngstown and Warren as the largest cities in each county and the county seats. But again, we want a more comprehensive view, and so are going to be looking at other communities. I saw the city of Niles is here. You are part of this plan and strategy, and other parts of the counties. And that is because we know that individual places are going to benefit from the really context-sensitive recommendations that we will be making, but there's also a lot of power and opportunity in thinking about the housing market from a regional perspective. And this is very much in alignment with other work that's going on through the Chamber and Eastgate. So to be clear, we are kind of keeping that dual eye on individual communities and then also the region itself. Okay, so to develop the regional housing strategy, we are going to collect and synthesize quantitative data and qualitative data. And the quantitative data is going to give us fine-grained geocoded information, meaning information that we can see visually on a map. So this ensures we're not just like, working from vibes alone, like we're actually like looking at the census and a lot of other data. But quantitative data is rarely collectible in real time, and that's going to be the case here. So we are going to be doing a lot of interviews to make sure that we know about emerging issues that may not be captured in the data. And the interviews are also going to help us help you contextualize for us the quantitative data that we are seeing and help us identify upcoming opportunities. And we'll talk about this here more in a second, the interviews and conversations that my team primarily will be having with you all and others in the community. You all are going to help us gut check the findings and conclusions that we're developing, and also making sure that the recommendations that we provide are ones that are actionable. So the regional housing strategy and then the implementation plan that will go along with it, which is basically sort of the to-do list / blueprint, we're going to provide concrete tools, programs, and strategies that improve existing housing stock, identify opportunities for new development, and maximize existing programs, entities, and other resources. And when we talk about maximizing entities and existing resources, we're talking about local alignment, right? And making sure that everyone's sort of on the same page and there's limited duplication and that we're really trying to, put every dollar to the best place possible. But also, what are the state tools and policies that you might be able to tap into, which is our expertise, another expertise that we have in-house at our organization, and then also potential federal opportunities. So we want to come to you at the end of 2024 with a very complete sort of to-do list, as well as sort of the vision that you all will be moving to carry forward together. So this is the overview of the timeline of this project. And today is the big project kickoff. And our goal here today is just to make sure that you know what we are doing. We know that many of you probably were aware that Eastgate had been contemplating doing a housing study, that they perhaps maybe you knew that they engaged a consultant, but you probably didn't know the details. And so that is the purpose of today, is just to kind of make sure that everyone is aware of what we are going to be doing. And then also, we want your early feedback and guidance. Quantitative data collection has already been occurring and is going to continue through the first several months of 2024. And the interviews that I mentioned, we are going to start them soon, maybe December, definitely by January. And those interviews are going to occur through the winter, spring, and summer. And as we complete the 2 quantitative deliverables, which we're going to provide more details about here in a second, we're going to want your feedback. We're going to want to be testing ideas to make sure that those are accurate and also helpful tools. So our intention is to deliver final products by the end of 2024 so that you all, local leaders, Eastgate, others, are hitting the ground running with to-do lists and blueprints by 2025. So now that I've given you that kind of top line overview, I want to provide more details about several of these major inputs, because that is where we're going to need you all to be, as I said, providing us information or guidance. So I'm going to start, we're going to start with the market value analysis, which we sort of hinted at, which is also sort of the second part of today's meeting, which Mike's going to talk a little bit about more. But Mike, just for folks who are not going to stick around for the second hour of today's meeting, can you talk through what the MVA does and kind of what to expect as a final product? Cool. Oops.
Excuse me. So the first phase of the housing strategy plan is really to establish a baseline of existing conditions in the local real estate market. And so the market value analysis is a tool that was initially developed in partnership with the city of Philadelphia 25 years ago to help the city create a plan for allocating a $300 million bond initiative that was designed to redevelop the neighborhoods of Philadelphia. And as you might imagine, $300 million sounds like a lot of money, but it can disappear into a city of 2 million people fairly quickly if there's not a real concerted effort to be strategic about where those dollars are deployed. And so what the MVA is really designed to do is thinking about it as an analytic tool. Right? The result of the MVA is a tool that the cities, the counties, the region can use to understand the variation across the different housing markets that are active across the region, and then to make decisions about where to deploy scarce resources, which is subsidized capital, other kinds of subsidized dollars that are coming into local real estate as a way to stimulate private market activity in these places. Right? And the idea and the goal of the market value analysis on the one hand is for everybody who's engaged in this process to start on the same page with what are the prevailing conditions that we're dealing with in the city and in the region. And from that starting point, prioritize our time and the deployment of our dollars across the region as a way to stimulate private market activity, but also to build off the existing strength that is present in different parts of the city and different parts of the counties. And so that is the main goal of the market value analysis. And in the second half of our time here today, in the second hour, we're going to start digging in a little bit to the quantitative data that we've already collected from both counties and the cities, looking at these underlying conditions that will go into the development of the tool itself. And so for folks that are able to stick around for the second part, you are welcome to be part of that discussion with us. We're going to look at some detailed maps. We're going to look at how the indicators are distributed across that urbanized region that Allison showed. And it's an opportunity to start validating some of these underlying data and to get the community input into the process, which on the one hand cultivates buy-in for the process itself, and on the other hand sort of helps us validate the reliability of the underlying data. Because we also want to make sure that the results of the analysis generate a tool that is reflective of the existing conditions. Right? And part of that is both a quantitative exercise, but it's also a qualitative conversation piece, right, with everybody in this room and folks that are riding around with us across the counties to make sure that the data that we've received accurately reflect what's happening on the ground. So here's the process real quick, just as a, okay. So this is the process that we go through for conducting the MVA, and it's based, and what's important to understand is that there's going to be a housing needs assessment that's being done as part of the plan and the market value analysis. Market value analysis is primarily grounded in local administrative data. Right? We want to use as much local administrative data as we can. And so for the last couple of months, we've been collecting these data from the counties, from the cities, from the municipalities outside of Youngstown and Warren, to collect as much local data as we can, because we know it's the most accurate and we know that it's the most up to date, as opposed to things that you're getting from the census or data that have multi-year lags on them. Right? And then once we get all those data, right, we'll drive around the counties and start to manually inspect the reliability of those records. So for the last few days, Colin and I have been driving around Youngstown, driving around Warren, driving around the counties. A handful of folks in this room accompanied us yesterday and shared their local knowledge of the local markets, helping us sort of get to the parts of each city that are important, helping us understand the variation across the different inputs that we've collected, and helping us think through what's missing, right? And how do we sort of identify and create indicators of either investment or distress that are going to accurately reflect what's going on if we don't actually have a very clear indicator for what that is. And so we are very much in stage 1 and 2, right, in this process. We'll have a chance to look at some of these data as we move on. Once we get comfortable with the underlying data, we'll put it through a cluster analysis to identify similar types of markets across the region. And in a place like this, it could be 8, it could be 10 different types of market clusters where they are similar across the inputs that go in, and then distinct between any other markets. So we'll create a typology of different housing markets across the region that range from the strongest to the most distressed, and middle markets in between that are differentiated across key variations on the inputs that are going in. And we'll see what those inputs are when we get to the second half of today. And then we'll do more rounds of validation. Like we'll come back and we'll drive around to see which of the model options that we have most accurately reflects the conditions on the ground. And part of that is also a dialogue with this group and an opportunity for everybody here to look through a couple of different options of what those results could be, so that when we settle on what the final option is going to be, what the final model is going to be, that everybody here is in agreement that yes, this actually pretty much represents the variation in the different housing markets across Mahoning and Trumbull counties. Right? And then the result, right, is an interactive display, right, that everybody here can roll over and see at a block group level, right, where the distribution of different housing markets across the region and what the underlying data are that were used to calculate and identify where these places are going to fall across the region. And then it will be integrated into the housing plan in a way where the strategies that are developed by Allison and her team are differentiated on the basis of the market strength of those places. Right? And it becomes a way to make policy recommendations that are aligned with prevailing conditions. And it also becomes a way to justify the need for different kinds of interventions in different places. And there are cities and communities that we work with across the country that will use the results of their MVA to align their applications for federal funds, for state funds, to do the targeted interventions to support local housing efforts across the country. And housing and urban development in many state houses recognize, and many housing finance agencies recognize the MVA as a tool that helps do this alignment work. Right? And it's recognized as an approach that is justifiable, defensible, and accurate, right, in terms of thinking about how to differentiate the kinds of activities that state and federal funding streams can come in and support in places like Youngstown and Warren. And so in that sense, it becomes a very nice starting point for the discussions around strategy selection and deployment.
Thanks, Mike. Just to kind of make this more concrete, I'm going to go back to, so this is a map that we, that Reinvestment Fund did of Akron that Greater Ohio was also partly involved in. And so, for example, the housing strategy that we are in the midst of writing for Akron says, well, the different colors have letters, but for the purposes of this conversation, we say like the purple and blue neighborhoods need homeowners, well, they're fine actually in Akron, but the yellow and green neighborhoods in Akron need homeowner stabilization programs like roof repair. The neighborhoods that are, orange, they need rental assistance. And so being able to tie to very specific neighborhoods, the types of interventions helps you be very strategic about limited resources, but then also really build upon emerging or existing strengths. So just to kind of make this a little, help you kind of see how this will then tie in potentially. But as Mike sort of alluded to, and I want to talk a little bit more about, there's other inputs that we are taking to develop the strategy. And the next is our housing needs assessment, which my team is going to be doing primarily. And the housing needs assessment is going to look at basically, at the end of the day, affordable housing needs and challenges and opportunities in our study areas. And those, we're going to be looking at a lot of demographic data, a lot of kind of understanding what the quality of housing looks like. And so Mike's information is very geocoded, it's very place-based. Ours is going to be more population, looking at populations and looking less about individual specific geographies. We are going to focus on the 2 county seats and then the counties at large. But this is an example of some of the data that we are going to be able to generate through the housing needs assessment. So this is a graphic of the percent of households lacking complete kitchen or plumbing facilities. And you can see kind of how that plays out across the region. We are going to have a lot of information in the housing needs assessment. And I'm going to tell you right now, we are also going to make sure that there is sort of like the top line key numbers for you so that you don't get lost in the forest of data. But I wanted to just kind of highlight just how deep and sort of specialized information can be. And again, this helps us then understand sort of what are the highest priority challenges, right? And helping kind of prioritize responses. Again, also, we're going to make sure that all of this housing needs assessment is feeding in with the market value analysis and then the qualitative information you're providing to make these data-driven recommendations. I'm going to stop here and see if there are questions about the housing needs assessment or the MVA, the market value analysis. The market value analysis, as Mike alluded to, you all are going to get sort of like a part 2 for the data nerds who want to stick around. So we might be able to answer some of those questions. But you can zap the QR code, and that should give you then a screen that you can type in any questions you may have about the housing needs assessment or market value analysis. We're going to talk about interviews here in a second. You can also, old school, just raise your hand and ask a question. Go ahead, Guy. Good to see you.
I'm seeing and hearing a lot about affordable, special needs, stressed neighborhoods.
It's the whole spectrum.
Yeah, where is
the market rate?
Market rate.
Yes.
Higher education workforce, leader, engineers, software developers, where they live,
Yeah, Guy, that's a great question. So the question is this just about affordable housing, or are we talking about the whole spectrum, particularly housing that might attract sort of the upper management type of workers? Yes, that will also be part of it. And frankly, this map, going back, is, I mean, again, this is the Akron version, right? But this is going to help us start to identify those opportunities. Also, we are going to be looking at, where are the plots of land where you have that ability to assemble, to scale for a subdivision. Absolutely. Sir.
Workforce now.
Workforce.
Because, what I know what your study's going to show you, you're going to show a whole lot of old housing. And it's housing that people just don't want. And is this study going to deal with that particular issue? I get upper management, but workforce housing, so that we can attract folks, especially if the economic growth is going to happen here. That can be somehow.
Yes, absolutely. So we are looking at housing across the full spectrum. Maybe a little less on the deeply subsidized, although we'll have some opinions about that. But yes, we are going to be looking at the naturally occurring affordable housing, workforce housing, and I'm assuming you mean like 80% to 120% AMI, area median income. Yes. And then some of that kind of upper level management housing for sure. And luckily right now, there are a number of programs that are coming out at this from the state of Ohio that are specifically targeted to increasing the supply of workforce housing, which I know like Deb is aware of at the Land Bank, because you'll be administering one of those programs. And there's others that are in development now. So one of the benefits, I think, of having us on board is that we're going to be able to kind of keep Eastgate and then others in the loop on how to get well positioned to access those resources. All right, question. All right, Ian, second. I'll go here first.
Yes. Regards to the overall analysis, particularly with regards to rental housing, their plans or policy recommendations to work with local legal aid organization, either in courts and common pleas and or municipal court slide, you have a lot of 5321.04 violations that can be cured through expedited rent escrow proceedings, et cetera. Are there any plans to discuss that? Full disclosure, I'm an urban development attorney.
Great. Well, I want to talk to you then. I'm going to make sure you get my card. Yes. So we will be making recommendations on steps that individual communities or the region needs to take. And what we find often when we do these types of studies is we need to better protect tenants and vulnerable tenants. And so that, and then, we outline kind of specifics based on what we are seeing and hearing from experts on the ground. So yes, that will show up. But to be clear, just to sort of manage expectations, what we are giving you is our expert opinion on things that need to happen or, areas of growth and opportunity, but it will be up to you all to actually implement, right? We will do our best to set you up for success, but at the end of the day, we're not the ones passing the ordinances, and I know you know this, but just wanted to kind of make sure we get that on the record. Ian, go ahead. And then I'll get to the, we got lots of questions. Okay, go ahead, Ian.
Sure, yeah, this is kind of a down in the weeds question, but specific to the MBA, I think we all know that housing markets aren't confined to cities or counties. One thing that I'd asked Tricia and Justin kind of leading into this, are we going to look at Columbiana County? There's certainly a lot of sprawl. A lot of people have been former residents of Mahoning County moving into Columbiana County, where Columbiana and Mahoning meet, particularly in the city of Columbiana. I do think there's reasons that we would want to understand that, particularly from a regional housing policy perspective, and also understanding and managing sprawl and the growth of the region given our population. So.
Mike is eager to respond to that.
Yeah, and that's a really important question, and it's a really important phenomenon that's happening here and it's happening in other places. And there is a data set that we're able to use as an overlay on top of the MBA, where we'll look at where people are living and working and sort of what their commute patterns are. And you can start to see where people at different income levels are living, where they're working, to what degree are they coming in and out of the counties, in and out of the cities, and how are they distributed across both the two counties in Trumbull and Mahoning, but then in neighboring counties. So we can zoom it out, right, to see sort of where people at different income thresholds are living and working. And that provides a lot of insight for thinking about both the development of housing at different price points, but also sort of how you're attracting workers, right, and bringing them into the city or out. And that was something that was really big for Akron the last time we were there, and continues to be an issue for them around just outside of the city. The population looks very different than just inside of the city. Right? And we'll see the same. We'll see similar things here, I suspect, based on what you're saying.
In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving forward, but we have these questions, we have photos of them, and if we have time, and we're not going to run into the second hour of this, we'll come back to these. But if you want your question answered now, stick around. My colleagues Erica and Javine will be available after 10:30 out in the lobby. So if you want to get your questions answered then, these questions or others, they will be around. And you should have the one-pagers that have our email addresses. I'm also going to show our emails at the end. Hopefully we'll have time. Okay, so then the last major input we're going to rely on is the expertise and opinion of stakeholders like you. And as we've been saying, as Mike's been saying, as I've been saying, right, we want to truth check the quantitative data. We want you to flag the issues we may not uncover, but we absolutely need to know about. And we want to get the strategy and the implementation plan right. So we're going to do interviews through Zoom, phone. We might even do some email interviews. We're going to probably do some in-person interviews. We're going to do group interviews. We'll talk to people individually, right? So there's a whole range of different ways that we're going to be getting inputs. The other thing is that we want to bring you all and whoever else you think needs to be in the room back together mid-project and at the 90% completion stage. And that is so that we can avoid having siloed conversations, because as we're talking to individual, interest groups or individual people, right, we want to make sure that we're not kind of losing the forest for the trees here. So bringing you all together, I see you can't see this. The second stakeholder meeting is Q2 of 2024, and the third is likely to be Q4 of 2024. And in those meetings, you're going to be able to learn what our findings and working conclusions are, and you're going to help us really do any course corrections or refinements that we need to do. That second meeting in particular is going to be very important because that is going to be midstream, right? And so we don't want to get to the 90% sort of completion stage and then find out we got like, you know, took a left turn somewhere when we shouldn't have. Like I said, we are going to make sure that you all are getting something done by the end of 2024, so you can hit the new year, you know, with things in hand. But we also realize that to do that, we need your cooperation in responding to our request for email for interviews. So I'm just kind of saying now we would welcome your cooperation there. This is a high level summary, I realize. Some examples of the folks that we're going to be talking to are developers, realtors, bankers, financiers, the business community, community development organizations, churches, Urban League. These are the types of people that we're going to be talking to. But as we get going, we will welcome your suggestions of others that maybe we have missed on our list. I think right now we're up to about 60 or 70 people or individual or interest groups that we want to talk to. But again, we want to make sure that we're not having a partial or incomplete view of what you all are experiencing and seeing and what you think needs to be happening here in the two counties. Again, I'm going to open up Mentimeter for questions. Also, clearly, if you raise your hand, you kind of jump to the front of the line. So if anyone has any questions about the stakeholder process and or how it might interact with the quantitative data or how we plan to be sliding into your inboxes and on your phone lines, now's a good time to ask. Yes, go ahead.
Are you specifically going to reach out to mayors and or township trustees of basically all the communities?
Yeah, and we've started to do that already. And so are you a mayor or township trustee? Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss you. Yeah, we will be. We may not hit every single person. We may want to kind of just bring the mayors together, you know, or just the township trustees. But yes, because they are all members of Eastgate, we fully expect that we will be interacting with those leaders, those community leaders. For the interview list, can you share that so we can see who might be missing? Yes, we can do that. Like I said, I have this like kind of high level one, but I will say off the top of my head, we're talking like, well, the realtor, we're oftentimes when we do these projects, we go to sort of, you know, like the Realtors Association for the region or the Builders Association or the chamber. And that's what we'll be doing here. So anyone who's going to be touching real estate and housing, we want to talk to them. So those are, I know it's still kind of a vague answer, but that's kind of a high level. Again, if you want to stick around after this portion, my colleagues have a more complete list and can make sure that we are not missing anyone. Well, infrastructure stakeholders, city, county, sewer, and water. Yes, we are planning to talk to the port. We will be, as we were just talking about, talking to local government officials, either the mayors or, you know, we can talk to their public services departments. We can't talk to everyone, unfortunately. So we are hoping that, you know, the county commissioners can give overviews and or, you know, connect us to the right people. That this is definitely important as we're thinking about housing and growth. We want to make sure that infrastructure is sustainable in the long term. It's something that we as an organization are very cognizant about. So yes, we will want to talk to those folks. Philanthropic institutions. Oh yes, we need you at the table. We will definitely be inviting all of the philanthropic institutions to be part of the conversation for sure. All right, I'm going to move us along, although I realize there may be more questions. As I switch the screen, does your Mentimeter also switch, or are you still able to input questions, even if I move? Let's test it. Did you lose the screen where you can input information?
Yeah, it's just your slide now.
Okay. All right, I'll leave this up then. I'll leave this up. Okay, so the last slide has our information about how to contact us. And again, it's on the one pager. So we'll just leave the Mentimeter up for now. We, as I was just saying, Erica and my colleague Javine will be available out here, out in the lobby here in a few minutes. And then those of you who want to geek out on the market value analysis, Mike's about to go deep on that here for a little bit. But we want to make sure that you are feeling like you have a general sense of what's going on. Again, this feels very high level because we have not, the market value analysis has started to run, but it's still kind of early days there. We don't have a lot of like meat right now, and we realize that, but we thought that it would be really important for you all as stakeholders to know that this process was even going on, that you know that we will be contacting you, and that we are expecting your participation at those large stakeholder meetings. Again, the one sort of early summer, late spring in Q2, and then the one basically a year from now, right, as we're starting to finish up the project. We will want your participation and for you to bring buddies who you think should be at this conversation right now and may not be here today. With that, we do have, I'd say, 4 minutes if you have any questions or feedback you want to provide to us right now before I cede the floor to Mike and his team. But yeah, we have a few more minutes if there's anything else that we want to get addressed or covered. Okay. You want me to flip back to the housing needs assessment Mentimeter? Okay, let's go back to that because there was a bunch of questions. Ooh, 6 questions. Okay. Are housing needs based on housing quality standard, residential rehab standard, or other standards? We are going to be looking at HUD data, the community housing, what's CHAZ stand for? It's called CHAZ. CHAZ. We're going to primarily be looking at that, but not exclusively. Mike's team is getting eviction data, code violation data, tax delinquency data. So we're going to also have that information in hand so that we can sort of understand what's going on. But basically, in terms of the housing needs, particularly on sort of the troubled housing side, that's really going to be based on HUD standards. Affordable housing located near accessible transportation, retail, social services, et cetera, land use considerations to avoid continued sprawl is my guess. Yes, we will be making recommendations on that. Future meetings, how will you engage residents? Learning opportunities and preparation. Right, okay, so I think this is a question about sort of grassroots versus grass tops. We want resident opinions and perspectives. We also know that we can't talk to every resident in both counties. So we are to some extent relying on those organizations that are doing the day-to-day work with residents, whether that's the CDCs or churches or urban leagues. So we are going to be a little more reliant on sort of the organizations who have those relationships and that level of trust than us individuals coming in and kind of swooping in, talking to individual residents. However, if you think there is 1 or 2 or more residents that you think we absolutely need to hear their perspectives on, we want to know that. You have our emails on that 1-pager. I think this is really needed when folks have been brought along. Yes. Will the analysis correlate community income tax rates or the mere existence of income taxes and its effect on new and existing housing? We will keep that in mind. That was not part of the original scope as envisioned, but certainly will have an impact on housing. So we will look at that. We will need probably Eastgate's help and for a map of taxing jurisdictions and levels. That's easy. Or if someone else has that, that's great. Are there any other questions at this stage about kind of the big picture, where we're headed over the next year? Will we get a sense of how our communities compare to others? So we at this stage, we're not planning to, as sort of a matter of putting Eastgate's resources to the highest and best uses. We are not planning to do a whole lot of comparing how either Mahoning Valley or Trumbull County compares to other communities. We will, GOPC, we work only in Ohio. We have a very good sense of the different kind of regions in the state. So we will, as sort of a matter of course, as we're writing the strategy, I'm sure comment on like, well, this is looking very similar to Akron, or this is what Dayton's experiencing. So we will mention that, but in terms of like, how how many vacancies or what's the rate of vacancy in Youngstown versus Cleveland, we are not planning to do that right now. The MVA, I think, is going to be a more important tool in understanding sort of within the region, the different markets and how things are shaking out.
That's right. And we'll be able to talk a little bit about how the region compares to other places we work. Really stick around and give you a sense of some of these other places and how comparable the affordability challenges are here compared to other places. How comparable the price distribution is here to other places. And those kinds of things we can benchmark a little bit. And for the housing needs assessment, there's probably you can put like an Ohio line, right, for the kinds of metrics that will come out of the CHAZ data that will describe the housing needs across the region. So at least you can ping to Ohio, but not every region.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We appreciate you all coming down this morning. So at this stage, I am going to click off Mentimeter. We will be able to re-access these questions. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to them. Here are our contact information. Again, it should also be on, it is on the one pager, so you have it there. As just a sort of like chain of control or chain of communication, Reinvestment Fund is our sub-consultants, so we didn't provide their phone number. Also, Mike and Colin are in different offices, but you can reach them by email, and you have our information, and you also have Eastgate, Trisha, and Justin's information. Thank you for your time, data nerds who want to stay or who have been asked to stay by Mike and Trisha. Please stay. But everyone else, I think you are now free to grab a donut on your way out. And as I said, my colleagues, Javine and Erica, will be out in the lobby if there's any kind of quick conversation that you want to have right now. All right. Thank you, everyone.
We'll keep the NBA conversation.
Okay, Mike is saying you get a 10-minute break before you go data wild with the NBA. Okay, so a 10-minute break. Thank you, everyone.
What's your first meter experience?
Yeah, curious.
I know.
I figured out. It's actually a lot easier. Once I got through all the documents, it's actually it just requires some extra time. People will be on but there's actually like and again, understanding it's involved. Well, yeah, so I have didn't have actually he's a great guy. And so, after that, consequently, it's like a sin. Literally, all we need is this gentleman to just sign everything. I don't think we need it. Well, no, I think well, that just that it's rich. Yeah, yeah. Well, I also I was just yesterday. And we just yeah, and in this case, it's really great, particularly because we really address the legal situation. So I did that. Yeah. So it's So if we have them.
Well, they have. Well, so yeah, there is a fast. There's a fast. Yeah, that's actually.
I'm Arnie. I'm a Liberty Township trustee.
Oh, almost me too.
Yep, just north of Youngstown.
Yep, we were in Liberty yesterday.
Oh, were you? Did you get to drive around?
Yeah, yeah.
So, we're like a first tier suburb.
Mhm.
We have issues of, we have really
There's
nice
some
neighborhoods.
variation in Liberty.
Yeah, quite a bit. We got a whole bunch of land north of the freeway. It's undeveloped. We really do need to get a set of what the utilities are there. But I think what I'm really concerned about is preservation of existing good neighborhoods, because like the guy was talking about, he lives right down the street, from me, is the need to preserve unique aging housing. We got some beautiful, beautiful homes, mid-century modern homes but we got people moving in them can ill afford to take care of them.
Right.
So I don't know if we have we're not doing a good job of enforcing maintenance.
Right.
So that declines, and we lost. We're going to lose neighborhoods that could be attractive to people, moving in for jobs.
Yeah.
So that's something I think we, really could use some
yeah,
help on.
I mean, housing preservation funds are things that exist. So
Yeah.
You can apply for funds to create, establish like a revolving loan fund.
Yeah.
Where you can give people low cost or no cost capital to replace a roof, do basic system repair, that they have to repay, usually.
Well, could you do it on middle income neighborhoods or?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it. There are, I think we're up to like 200% of AMI.
We could use those tools. I'm trying to push the other two trustees into adopting a better code. Right now, we're using a maintenance code. It's the International Maintenance Code, which is very broad, covers most things we can't even do anything about because we're a township.
Right. Yeah,
But if so I'm trying to get them to adopt another maintenance code.
Mhm.
But that can't be our only tool. I think we need to go in and approach people. Why aren't you doing this? Can we help you?
Yeah.
And if we had those tools, one tool we have is we could actually go and make repairs and put it on their tax bill. I don't know if that's usually not done, but it's something that I think we can do.
It's something to think about.
Yeah.
And you would probably want to tell people that you're doing that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's some hesitation.
Yeah.
But if we could actually get them to do it, to go to a fund and say, look,
That's right.
even if it's a middle, we think of these programs as just a low, moderate income program.
No, they're middle income neighborhood, but there is need there, right? All the way up.
Do you have examples of who's doing that now? It's
Philadelphia
using-
does it. Detroit does it.
Okay.
Usually they're bigger cities.
Okay.
That are able to attract, to get the amount of capital, you would need a regional pool, probably. Like you would need to be in a pool with Warren and a pool with
Okay.
Youngstown, probably in terms of
So it's
just
something we might
creating.
that's something you might be able to help us with strategies like that.
It would be this, you would have to collaborate and put in.
Okay,
And they're also, it's a philanthropic ask sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
like philanthropy will seed things like this.
yeah,
But you have to have somebody to administer it. You know,
Yeah.
oftentimes a government entity that will administer it, even if they're not capitalizing, right? So like, you know, a local foundation will put up $50 million or something
Yeah.
as, you know, affordable loan pool that is going to, you know, send out, you know, give people low cost or no cost loans, right? Or grants. It's better to do loans because people repay them and
Sure.
they recapitalize it.
yeah, yeah,
Right? To do regular maintenance that people can't afford otherwise. Putting
Yeah.
on new roofs, changing,
Yeah.
updating plumbing, updating the heat system.
Yeah. Again, we're often talking about people that probably could afford it,
But don't know.
but don't want to. We have
That's
issues where,
different.
yeah, people put, they might put a teenage kid, or say a kid that just got out of college, they leave town, they leave him in the house, and then you're stuck with a
Yeah.
deteriorating house, and we're supposed to feel bad that we're, you know, trying to enforce something.
Yeah. 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 That's a topic.
Yeah,
Right,
those
I mean-
are, I think they're big issues to be able to preserve the first tier suburbs, to
Yeah.
prevent sprawl, because we have people that just moved to Canfield and Poland because they
Yeah.
don't see,
But I don't say.
yeah, yeah,
My card. And those kinds of recommendations are the sorts of things that will come.
You know,
Like,
they
the
own about
preservation
400
of the
units that
existing,
haven't
like,
had sheet.
viable housing stock
yeah,
is critically, is more important
yeah,
than doing infill.
yeah, yeah, not just affordable, but
Yeah.
housing that, you know,
It goes up to middle.
Yeah.
income.
yeah,
I'm sure. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, that's,
yeah. One of the issues you have with lending institutions, they see that the person can afford a mortgage, but they don't pay attention to, you know,
we have to go. Yeah, no, we should go. Yeah, we should.
I think so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll keep on. Colin, come on. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna bring us back. So, very nice amount of folks hanging in, which is great. And so we have, you know, about an hour, 15 minutes or so to start really digging into the MVA. And so the second part of this initial meeting essentially functions as an initial sort of opportunity for us to begin vetting some of the underlying data in the market value analysis. So I'm quickly first going to walk through a little bit more of a detailed overview of the MVA so that everybody sort of understands more clearly what the goals of the analysis are. And then Colin will start walking us through the underlying data and talk about some of the validation that we've been doing already. And as we're going through a series of maps that you'll be seeing around these different data points, we're going to give people, and we want people to take a moment to look at them and try to digest them and provide us with feedback, right? And we'll give you a little bit more guidance on how to do that, but like we're really trying to do here is to make sure that the data we're collecting reflect your experience and understanding of these local conditions. So you'll see what we're talking about as we get on here. But I'm going to skip this slide because we talked a little bit about how the MVA was developed. But these assumptions that we bring to the MVA are important just to understand and orient yourself to the way that we think about housing redevelopment and housing investment across the cities that we work, and how the MVA tool itself is deployed and used by cities and county governments across the country. Right? I mean, the primary starting point here is thinking about subsidy as a scarce resource, right? Subsidy can incentivize a market, but it's not going to create a market out of nothing, right? And the idea of thinking about using the results of the MVA as a tool to deploy subsidy in as an efficient and effective way as possible is really about using it to incentivize private market activity. Right? We want to be able to use subsidy in a way to leverage the behavior, right? And in the investments of traditional lending institutions in getting sort of market rate capital into places that they otherwise wouldn't go without a signal from the subsidy that you're able to put in there, that there is existing strength here. There are returns that you can get by investing in these places, even if it wasn't on your radar historically as a place where we might invest, right? And part of that too, in that the MBA is able to identify is these nodes of strength within otherwise distressed areas, right? And those are the places where we can build out from, right? And identifying what these pockets of strength are in places where you wouldn't have otherwise thought to look for, right? Where a strong market might intersect with one that has a little bit more distress, thinking about how you pull activity on one side of the tracks onto the other, right? These are sort of approaches that the MBA will help us think about the strategies that are going to build off these existing nodes of strength in order to incentivize the kind of development that might be absent in a place that is going to help it move in the direction we want it to go. And part of that, right, is also this assumption that everybody in the city, everybody in the county, everybody in the region, right, deserves nice things, right? Everybody is a consumer of the public services that the cities, the counties, the region, the municipalities are all providing. Everybody is a consumer of the housing options that are available for you, and the amenities that exist. And the assumption that everybody should have and should benefit from the activities that are going on in these places and should have access to choice-worthy options for where they live, where they shop, where they work, sort of drives a lot of the work that we do, right? We want the places to be, every neighborhood to be the kind of place that someone would choose to want to be in, right? So that you are able to exercise your agency, right, about where you want to live, as opposed to feeling like you're stuck somewhere, right? And this final point, right, and this is something that will come up over and over again in the course of developing the housing plan, is that we really are committed to the idea that objective quantitative data should be one part of the decision-making process. We aren't so naive to believe that it is the only and should be the only data input in making decisions around how we're deploying subsidy, how we're thinking about developing policy, but it should be part of the conversation, right? And the MBA itself and the results of it help us all get on the same page with the state of affairs that we're working in, right? And so that we can all agree, right? Because everybody has their own subjective idea and experience in the real estate market, right? And so this exercise is a way for us to create a common floor, right, for where we're going to start from and move ahead for over the next year. And so this is just, you know, a smattering of places where we've done the MBAs. We've done these all over the country, in places around here, like in Akron and in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And we'll be able to reference some of these places so that you get a sense of how does the region compare to other parts of the city, other parts of the country in terms of affordability, in terms of price, in terms of some of the other kinds of metrics that are going to go into the MBA. This is a list of different ways that municipalities, states, counties will use the MBA, right? And oftentimes the way, and as I mentioned before, the way to think about the MBA is as a tool, right? The result is a tool, right? And a tool is only as good and is only as useful for how it's used, right? It's not going to tell you what to do, right? It's going to help you identify the most strategic places to do what you do. And it's going to provide you with a data-informed justification for the decisions that you want to make about where you're going to invest your time, energy, and money, right? And it has been used to inform CBDG allocations. It's been used to inform the allocation of home funds. There are cities that use it for strategic code enforcement, identifying places that are going to respond in different ways for it. It's been used to sort of track development activity over time in places where they're doing it over and over again. It's used to inform strategic decisions around demolition or redevelopment. City of New Orleans uses it that way fairly regularly, as does places like Houston, where there are real water issues, right, in terms of thinking about how you do redevelopment in your places. And we'll share these slides with everybody today afterwards. So you'll have this list and everything else that we're seeing so that you can have a chance to look at it more closely. I went through this process slide in the introduction, right? we are here very much in 1-2, right? We started doing our manual inspection yesterday. The big point that we're sort of talking about here is this integrating local knowledge, right? And so all of these models are based on both the underlying data and the feedback from folks like yourselves, right? To validate the reliability of the data we've collected, validate the reliability of the results when we get into stages 4 and 5, when we have models that we've developed and we're coming out and testing them to make sure that the results of our cluster analysis are generally dividing up the different market types across the region accurately, and that they reflect the variation that you experience day to day in your work. So I am going to stop now and let Colin sort of walk you through the data that we have collected so far, and we'll start looking at maps. And we want people to be as engaged in asking questions, raising hands, pointing out places where we should look more closely. If there are places that this part doesn't look right, or this part doesn't, like, you guys should drive up there and take a look. We'll have a few hours today before Colin and I get out of town, but we're gonna be back, and we'll be back 2 or 3 more times doing validation trips. And so it's the kind of thing now that we're hoping to start getting this feedback around how to be as strategic as possible with our validation. And if our data aren't the right data, are they available, and how could we grab them from other places? Justin, did I kick off our teams from?
Just gonna change the sharing. Yeah.
Our team's friends. I'm often the team's friend, so I understand.
That's beginning. We don't want that be. So like this one next to here. Oh yeah. There we go. Thanks, Justin.
All right, great. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to step into the actual components of the market value analysis. So this list here, you can think of as essentially the ingredients that are going into the final cake that is the market value analysis. This is the list of things that we've been working on collecting over the past few months. It is not by any means an exhaustive list. So if there are indicators that you think are particularly important to understanding the residential real estate market here in Mahoning and Trumbull counties, we really welcome your feedback about different data that you collect and think about using to understand your housing markets and your communities. It is important that those are across both counties, though. I just want to add that caveat. And so what we're trying to do here is collect things that capture a wide range of dynamics throughout the housing market. You can see those dynamics that we're trying to collect information about on the left-hand side there. We've got some 3 broad categories of things that we're collecting information about. Those being property value and investment, so where are dollars going into the housing market, distress and vacancy, things like code violations, vacant structures, vacant land, and then a set of other housing characteristics that are important to understand the dynamics in those micro, very fine-grained markets, like what does the built environment look like? Are we seeing a lot of densely constructed single-family homes, or is there a presence of multi-family homes? What's the mix of owners and renters in an area? And then finally, how much rental subsidy is going into the market, generally in things like tax credit developments, public housing, and a variety of different programs you see from HUD. So on the right-hand side, you can see the source of the data that we're collecting. As Mike mentioned earlier, we're trying as much as possible to collect and use only administrative data, because we can look at that data all the way down to an address level or a parcel level. When we're doing our little drive around with our GIS system, we can just look house to house and say, if it says there's a permit here, do we see that there's a dumpster where somebody's doing some work, or do we see some guys on a roof, right, doing the work? That we can actually physically see, as we're driving around, that the data is reflecting the reality on the ground. It also helps us understand what things we might not be capturing, and I'll talk about those a little bit as we go into each individual indicator. But this is the first place, as you look at this list, where we'd really invite, either now or later as you have some time to think about this, your feedback about what are the data sets that you would use to think about your housing market, and are they represented well here, or is there another set of things that we should be working on collecting during this early phase of the data collection? Sure, if you have some ideas, that'd be great.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I served as the director of neighborhood stabilization for Slavic Village Development for 10 years prior to moving into private practice. Right now, we're the city of Cleveland, the South Euclid, and other localities with regards to neighborhood stabilization issues. I would suggest perhaps that some additional variables that you may want to consider, particularly with regards to housing characteristics. One of the things, and I also am a member of the VAPAC group, Big and Abandoned Properties Action Council in Cuyahoga County. Some of the things that we've been tracking that you may want to also consider is one, the transfer history. How many times has a property transferred in the last 12 months?
Right.
We've seen, there are obviously issues where properties change hands very quickly.
Right.
As you know, Ohio law allows for series LLCs, which is insane. But I can set up in my backyard theoretically 100 different LLCs that are all technically separate legal persons, and then transfer those properties in between those groups. What percentage of your renter households in general are owned by LLCs or corporations, and where is the principal place of business of those corporations? Are they in-state? Are they locally based, or are they regional or international? Because that's going to create a world of headache when you start talking about targeted interventions. Percentage of owner-occupied households that are on homestead exemption. Homestead exemption, of course, is only allowable if you are over a certain age or with disability. It's oftentimes a key factor, early warning sign that your property either A, could be becoming imminently vacant, or that there are other issues with the household relative to stability. And then finally, and this is actually kind of a weird nuance that we saw in Cleveland, where you do see rehab work that's ongoing, is that rehab work being done with permits? And the reason for that, of course, is that many times we see illegal conversion from single family to multifamily. And that creates another set of wrinkles. Well, it seems like a lot of folks in the room are familiar with that. So I just wanted to put that out there, that those are some things that that sometimes get overlooked, but that can really reveal a whole other set of data variables, particularly the transfer history and the percentage of your housing stock that's LLC or corporate owned.
Right. Yeah, those are all really great points. And I'll say on the building permit, which we're going to discuss a little later, but when we were driving around yesterday, we did notice, and Ian took us in some particular spots where there was a lot of building activity going on, and we definitely did not have it in our permit data. So we've been thinking about what other indicators could be for that, and the transfer history is one, like where you see flipping activity going on and you're seeing big increases from an early transfer to a later transfer, and you want to clean out the earlier transfer so it's not affecting our sales measure, things like that. So those are some of the things we learned as we've been driving around, which is why we value that process so much, and being able to drive around with people like John and Ian and Tricia, because they can tell us about what's going on here in a way that we can't see in the data until we come. So, but those are all great feedbacks. And I just want to follow up on the homesteads. So can you explain to me a little more about the particular eligibility that you mentioned with homesteads?
Well, it's my understanding that homestead varies by county. So my baseline would be in Cuyahoga County, but in Cuyahoga County, you qualify for homestead exemption upon application to the county. Once you hit the age 60, or you can show some form of disability, usually coming from SSDI. So if you submit your application, you're under the age of 60, but you do have a valid SSDI award letter, that will trigger the exemption from property tax.
Okay.
Where we use homestead exemption, we really kind of use it twofold. One, to stabilize households that otherwise would qualify, but just don't know that that exists, and to try to retroactively apply that in such fashion that our longtime owner occupants can age in place thus preventing vacancy unnecessarily. And then what we also do, we track that to really take a look at, kind of an early warning sign, right, of, potential other interventions, particularly looking at our census data, where we have an overlap of low to mod income plus homestead exemption. That's typically, you can make an educated guess that there may be some other issues there, and it provides an opportunity to reach out, establish a connection, particularly because what we've noticed is that there are more often than not elderly owner occupants that do not have any identifiable heirs, and kind of taking from the larger perspective, once that individual unfortunately passes away, vacant property owned by a deceased person with no estate creates a real headache.
Sure.
And so to be able to intervene, work with that person, establish something as simple as a transfer upon death affidavit.
Okay.
1 page, you file it with your county recorder.
Right.
That property then can automatically be executed to a beneficial owner, such as a land bank, a local nonprofit, some entity, even a church, whatever the case may be, that can effectively make sure that that property transitions back to productive use.
Right.
And you don't have the negative secondary effects which occur with vacancy over a long period of time.
Right. Yeah, that's great feedback.
Income threshold also with the
For
homestead.
Homesteads. Okay.
The older a homeowner is, the longer they've been on it, more likely they got on it regardless of their income level.
Okay.
But for more recent retirees, there is some limitation.
Okay.
And you know what it is? What is the income?
I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it clearly would, age 120 AMI probably is the range.
Somewhere around there. Okay, great. So we'll try and understand this.
That's the sort of thing we can look up.
Yeah, we'll be able to figure that out.
We were not quite sure how to interpret the homestead exemptions we were seeing.
Yeah.
Because in some states, like everybody who's a homeowner gets a homestead exemption, and you get like
Really not
a
the case.
discount on your tax bill.
Right.
And so having income eligibility sends a different kind of proxy for what it means to have an exemption than if we're in a place where it's just a proxy for ownership.
So a hand back.
Yeah, I'm actually, they forgot to add about disabled veterans. I'm part of the Homestead Act.
Okay.
I actually did it because I'm 100% disabled veteran.
Okay.
And there is none, unless that's by county for the threshold for income. They never said that for us, and I've had it for 9 years.
Okay.
Right, it's on the retirees.
Okay, that's why I was like, oh no, I don't know the threshold.
Gotcha.
But yeah, veterans can get it through the Veteran Service Commission or do it on their, as long as they have paperwork indicating that they're 100%.
See, thanks.
It's really easy.
That sounds good. So we'll look more into what the particular rules are to understand exactly how the homestead is working in the different counties, and if the rules vary across the counties, that'll be helpful. Any other thoughts on sort of our list of variables or ideas about things that you don't see that you think would be helpful to represent?
Sorry, you also want to look for household median age.
Household median age?
Yeah. I mean, well, if you want to retain your young population, look, I grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Warren, went to Kennedy. There's a reason I left. There's a reason I left and went to Ohio State and then up to Cleveland, right? Amenities. If you want to retain your young people and you're talking about, investments that you're making, you want to retain those young residents, right? Don't make investments for a
Sure.
different age demographic in an area where you have predominantly young people.
Okay. So at this point, our goal is to get things that are all related to the housing market directly, like characteristics of the properties. But when we get the model together, there'll be a second phase where we overlay other data that's relevant, like the age of people that are living in different areas, so you can understand like what housing types are appealing to people at different age ranges or groups. So it's helpful to keep that list of things that you think are related to housing but aren't directly housing together as well, because we will have that as part of the project just once we get the model tightened up. That's cool. I saw another hand over here, I think. No? Okay. Okay, so we're going to walk through maps of each of these different indicators and the data that we've collected so far. You saw the study area earlier, so this is based on what the census defines as the urbanized area in Trumbull and Mahoning counties. But this is another place where we welcome any feedback about, that's an area that we don't think of necessarily as being part of our urbanized area or not really being part of our housing market, or there are some areas that aren't represented here that we do think of as being part of the broader housing market in the two counties. So anything you see there as you're looking at the maps and you want to have some feedback about the geographies would be really helpful. As Mike said, we do this at the census block group level, and so that's what you're seeing shaded in there. Those are the different census block groups throughout our urbanized area. They're shaded in this case by the median sale price for residential single family homes, and on the bottom right there you can see what the shades correspond to different ranges of sale price. It's really important to note that this is just for mapping purposes. When we do the actual modeling, we take the actual value. So, if there's a block group that's 35,000, we're not going to put in a range from 30 to 60,000. The actual value goes into all the modeling. It's just there so you can see what the different ranges are. Another type of feedback that's often really helpful to us at this phase of the project is if you see areas and you say, like, that just doesn't line up with my experience being a resident of Mahoning County, that like at the intersection of 62 and someplace that the sale price is that. That's really helpful feedback to us because, as Mike mentioned, we're going to drive many more times and we're going to look at all different parts of the study area to make sure that the data is right and is useful and actionable for all of you. So any places that just look odd to you or different than your experience that you want to highlight for us, we will go there and inspect the data in those places. So please feel free to flag any of those, either as we're looking at the maps or you saw our contact information, feel free to contact us with those at a later point. Maybe sometimes it's a lot of information. If you want to look at the maps later, totally understand. So what we mean by median residential single family sale price is we've been taking the auditor's data and we've been cleaning out any sales that aren't valid sales. So there's a flag for valid sales, taking out things like within family transactions, deed changes where you just have a name change, prices under $1,000, those types of things that don't represent market transactions, but are just, changes in the deed history one way or another. And we've been joining all these to the parcels to make sure that the land use is 1, 2, or 3 family, so that we're only representing, the typical home that people live in across the area. And I think that's all the technical information you need to know about this particular map. Any feedback on what you see on the map? Any surprises?
How the census defines the urbanized area, there's definitely like pieces missing where there's continuous development. If I was drawing a map and looking at the regional housing market, I wouldn't have the lines going in and out.
Yeah, there's some strange geography. So the census is looking at the density of housing in the different areas, and that's how they're defining it. They look at it at a block level, and then they put those into a broader geography. We had to join it to the block group because that's our unit of analysis, and so we only included block groups that are at least 25% or more within the urbanized area. So you saw on that earlier map that there were a couple block groups that were in red as being not included. They touch the urbanized area, but they're mostly outside of it, and so we didn't include those in the initial study area. But this is all in a GIS format, so we can make changes as you see fit, as you say. That is part of my community, and that's a place I expect to be represented in the study.
Definitely on the east side, I would take it all to the city limit. Like southwest, there's a cutout on 62 from Youngstown going into Canfield. That's all in this development pretty much from the west side of Youngstown, following Canfield Road into Canfield.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, for me, I consider part of our region not just the commuting shed, but Columbiana, which is in southern Mahoning County and continues into northern Columbiana County. There's definitely significant development that's been happening there too in terms of housing. That's like south of Beaver Township and Portland following State Route 7 and Market Street. But yeah, I can tell you and John and all this too. Like you have all this stuff, but I would clean some of them lines up. It looks like even up in Warren, which I'm not quite as intimately familiar with, there's significant spots there that don't make sense to me.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah, John.
I wonder if maybe it would make sense to just kind of maybe smooth it out a little bit. And I agree with Ian. I mean, every area there that you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned in the, where Hubbard's kind of an island there that towards the northeast of Youngstown there, that it's, is sort of continuous development there, or that could probably be connected as well. But I wonder if maybe it just makes sense to sort of make a general study area based loosely on the urban, because I understand why it looks like that. Like you, I mean, I know that the census has a definition of, so much density. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what the actual number is, but if it, if the block meets it, it's in the urban area. If it doesn't, that's what you get. It's like, so I don't know, maybe just we need to sort of refine that a little bit.
Maybe take everything out to major roads, so everything is filled in, and there's no of these sort of odd gaps that you're seeing where the census is saying the density isn't high enough, but you think of that as all being continuous. Okay.
Revise a little bit, but I mean, for the most part, that's the urban area. Probably some areas that fall out of that particular boundary that we'd like to avoid.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Just something you might want to consider along the same lines. You overlay the infrastructure of current water.
That's a great idea.
That really would give you a better roadmap of where some of the low-hanging fruit would be for future development or redevelopment, particularly when you talk about desetting those.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Is that something that you have by any chance that I can ask you for? Okay. We can follow up. Justin has it? Perfect. All right. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Any other feedback on this map in particular? Anything you're seeing that's surprising? Yes.
I wouldn't say surprising, but I guess in addressing some of the pockets or ideas or the missing areas, a lot of it, like was mentioned, if you overlay the water and sewer, I can see right now there's a huge spot south of Warren going into Niles that is all industrial and commercial. There's nobody living there. That's what's missing.
Right.
But it is an urbanized, developed area right next to all urban area.
Makes sense.
And there's urban area to the left, urban area to the right, but it's missing the pie. But that's because it's all industrial commercial.
Right.
If you do an outline of that, I think a lot of these areas you'll probably see those missing pockets or low density is maybe there's an industrial park right here. There's neighborhoods on either side, but it doesn't meet that density threshold just because.
Yeah, and one thing we can do is use the actual land use, so be more inclusive, but then create a non-residential overlay that'll just kind of blank out those areas and show they're part of the same community, but they're not being used for residential use, they're industrial or other uses. Okay. Yeah, this is really helpful. Any other thoughts either about median sale price or about the study area in general? Yes.
Just share with us at least one copy of that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can share the maps. Yeah, there's a lot. There's like 400 block groups on that map, so there's a lot to see. The other thing we're going to work on after we go back is making an ARC Online map, which you'll be able to just go around and click on individual block groups and see what the different data values are there, or type in an intersection and it'll zoom you right over there and you can see like particular areas that you're interested in without having to look at like the entire region at once.
Make that available sooner than later. I think, right, you said like even this online research for your purposes.
Because it would be very helpful, like I just spent 5 minutes trying to figure out this one weird triangle.
Yeah.
It would be nice, you know, just to zoom in to see the roads.
Sure.
To identify where maybe something should be included, but also maybe where something should definitely not be included.
Yeah, absolutely. We will get that done next week and we'll share that with everybody. It'll get done. Yeah, it's not a lot of work.
You can put notes in it. Like you could put like a little comment in there so that we could see what you're thought is so that you guys can all be putting thoughts in on
Yeah.
some of these, particularly around like finalizing what the geography is going to be. Because we did go through a couple of places on the edge. We're like, is this really part of the urbanized area? This looks really different from everything else we've seen. So we can get that up pretty quick, but it's also, and we'll have one that's like just the geography and then the underlying data.
Yeah, that's
so
a good
that
idea.
you can sort of focus your comments either on housing sales price or like the geography itself.
Yeah, and you'll be able to just drop a pin with the comments. We'll be able to find exactly what intersection that you're interested in. That's really helpful to us. Okay. So our other measure of value is the variation of sale price. So the first map that we saw was the typical sale price for every block group. The darker shaded areas here are areas that have a lot of variation. So where if you had a place that had a typical home sale price of say $50,000, the darker areas might range from 10 to 100,000, where the lighter areas might only range from say 40 to 60,000, much less variation. So we want to know both what are things typically selling for, and then is there a whole bunch of range of sale prices within the area, or is everything selling for approximately the same amount? This one is a little bit tougher, I think, for people to sort of validate because you just don't think about things in that way generally. But
the other way to think about the variance is where variance is really high. Usually there's a lot of activity going on because you got the really low sales, you got the really high sales, you got a bunch of stuff in between, and where it's really sort of really low, the market is either stable where it is generally. So like it's not surprising for us after we drove around Youngstown yesterday that's where we're seeing a lot of variation because in those places where there's a lot of flipping activity going on, right, you're getting both the top and the bottom end. And that's what sort of pulls that variance.
Yeah. Are there any areas that you think of as being either places that are sort of changing that you don't see in those darker shades or places? No. So far, so good. Okay. So this is our map of share of homes, which really means residential parcels with a permit. And so you see there are some areas that are in the lighter shades where we think there is building activity going on, where we saw those activities, but they're not permitted. And so that's where we're going to start looking at some of those other indicators, like trying to measure where there's flipping activity going on, where we see repeat sales within a short period of time for much more in the second sale. And any other ideas you have about ways to measure the sort of non-permitted investment activities would be really helpful. You have a variety of different,
How do you know they didn't have permission?
Oh, because we have permit data. So at the parcel level, so we're driving around and saying, someone's clearly working here. Do we have it in our data file? And that's how we knew yes or no whether it's there.
I had told them that a lot of people picked out some stuff from it. And as we were driving around, we saw people, they would check their file. Keep in mind their file is a little older. So it could be yeah. So Colin too, just for the group, this is a permit for any type of work on the home. It's not just new unit, new housing starts.
That's right.
Even if you're replacing the roof, it's permits.
That's right. Yeah. So it's any building activity going on at the parcel level because we have a bunch of different municipalities. And so we're trying to create one measure across all those different places. So it's at a parcel level. If there was any residential building permit activity ranging from, a small reinvestment in the property up to full new construction. And if we're able to, we'll try and break out new construction from sort of rehabilitation or renovation activities, but it's going to depend on whether we can get that data consistently from all the different municipalities.
Consider it, even if it don't tell us anything, but if we could get the electric permit data, it's often people, if the electric's been off more than 2 years, they'll get the new service, get it infected, they might not get it now. Right. I don't know if that'll actually show anything or not, or even if it's publicly available, but I'd be curious to see it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Is there a particular person we should reach out to about that, or?
It's called the Central Electric Inspection Bureau. John, I don't think you see if that was public or can you?
Yeah, no, we'll look into that. But I know the utilities oftentimes are really guarded with their information. particularly electric.
Right.
But we'll see what we can get.
Yes.
Where did you get your permitting data from? Did you just go to the county?
We reached out to different municipalities
Okay.
and
I just looking at the map, I see like Niles is a very low percentage, but they don't go through the county building permit. So I didn't know if you went to the
Okay.
county, and they're not gonna have anything for Niles. So that
Right.
might explain some of the anomalies, but. or
Yeah, if
not
you
really
have any
anomalies, but-
connections with Warren, that's the one that.
that's the one we're really having a hard time getting data for.
Specifically, City of Warren.
Okay.
Is anything more?
Yes, well, sort of, okay. No, they're not here, but. We work with them. So we'll talk to them, see if you guys can answer with that. That was my questions. I'm like,
Okay.
I mean, it probably is pretty close to that, but it's not all.
Yeah.
Right.
Like my organization's permits and they're not being shown, so. Yeah, well,
Oh, thanks. That would be great.
They do utilize iWork, which is a software system, so they're excluded that data.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that'd be great.
talked to Eric and he doesn't know how to pull that data from iWorks. So if you have a relationship with him and can help him pull that, that would.
Yeah, I don't know Eric, I deal with Chris Tenniel.
Oh, okay.
CDO. Utilizes iWork all the time.
Okay.
Mention it to him, I don't know if that's where it would come from, but he's very good on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. That'd be really helpful. Any other thoughts on the permit data? Yes. So I think that's what we're trying to work on, is that we know there's some areas where it's not very accurate, that we're seeing in Youngstown, for example, that there's a lot of activity going on that we're not seeing in the data. And so that's where we're trying to think through those things like flipping or other indicators that we can use. So if there's any other things that you can think of that we could find in the data that would help us identify some of those non-permanent activities. Is there a particular place that you see that you think like there should be more permits there than what you're seeing on the map? Yeah.
And this is one of those things too, where we really want to make sure we're getting the permitting or at least the investment measure as accurate as possible. It might end up being a composite measure that we create using a variety of different things that on one hand, places that have reliable permit data where to use the permitting, places where we have to create a flipping indicator, we're able to create a flipping indicator. But that it might end up being multiple things that represent investment activity that we create a composite metric of what that's going to be. But the more accurate and complete data we can get, like from Warren, we know it's a big gap because they haven't provided it, and there's actual permitting activity going on. And a place like Youngstown, where there's development happening and people just aren't pulling permits, we have to do something different, right? Because there's not a record of it. So that's, we have to come up with proxies that way. As you think about this stuff and thinking about other data that are available, please let us know on how to deal with that, because these investment indicators are really important for sort of understanding the trajectory of what's happening.
Just, again, we do the question. Whatever we're I think being able to delineate what new home construction permits are out there is important. Because that is something that affects these communities very differently.
That's a lot easier to pull out.
Yeah, usually that's pretty clear. Yeah.
Are you going to endpoint overlay commercial permits?
We
Any correlation with new home developments relative to commercial?
Yeah, we absolutely could in that sort of second phase that I was describing, where we put a bunch of overlays on top of the MVA map to see what other things correlate with the market strengths that we're seeing. It's absolutely something that we could put together and put over there.
Building code
Get commercial.
So
So we'd have to characterize the different permits. So if we wanted to say, like, look for things that are working on commercial corridors versus where there's multifamily new building going on, we could look at those permits. No, this, like the sales, this is for parcels that are 1, 2, or 3 family. Mhm. Okay, yeah, we could absolutely add this.
I think 4+ units that you get, that's properties.
Yeah. Right. And usually that'll be in the description so we can size, say, points by the number of units that are going in, and you can visually see like where there's multiple projects, how many units are in the project, those kind of things. Get that sense. Any other thoughts on permits? So the next data set we're looking at is code violations. This works pretty similarly to permits, where we're joining them to the parcel file and looking at where there's concentrations of code violations. There's also missing areas on this map where we're still looking for data that are kind of similar to some of the places we're missing data for permits. So, yeah.
Question, I don't know if you have an answer, but I'm assuming in the model, having a higher percentage of code violations is not good for the market strength.
Mhm.
My question is, somewhere like Youngstown does have an active code enforcement department,
Mhm.
versus, let's say, somewhere that we're not showing much. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's not. It could be to have one person for, the whole township or whatever. So
Right.
how are we kind of normalizing that? Because it doesn't, just because we have that code violation data, does not, to me, from what I know, mean that that neighborhood necessarily has lower housing quality than one somewhere else where the city or public body is not doing code enforcement. So in the model, we're not penalizing the,
Mhm.
if you will, the market strength of those neighborhoods, because there's a whole bunch of code violations or rental registrations. Youngstown also has a rental, really only one in the region, got a couple others, but active rental registration program that's actually inspecting thousands of properties. Of course, we're going to have more code violations, but that doesn't mean North Boardman or, some of these I could go place by place. Doesn't mean that the housing, if we get to kind of an apples to apples, it doesn't mean housing quality. I know that might be getting a little too nuanced or in the weeds, but
No.
when I look at that, it's like it's all in Youngstown and a couple other places. The reason is it's because Youngstown's doing a lot of code enforcement. There are housing quality issues, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that fairly lines up with the overall housing quality of the region.
Sure. Right. So a couple of things. One is this is the data set that we have the least coverage for. So that means it's going to be the least likely that we're actually going to use it in a final model, especially if we just don't have areas that have the data. If we do have much better coverage when we go to the modeling, we'll make models with and without it so we can compare them. But the way the cluster analysis works is it doesn't actually like penalize or give pluses for certain things. It looks at the correlations and finds things that go together. So like you said, it could be that the code violation is actually a sign that people are actively interested in their neighborhood and they're making sure that everything is up to code in the neighborhood. And we might see that associated with investment activity or some other positives. And so the cluster analysis is able to draw that out in a way that, say, like a regression or another type of analysis might just penalize or just say every time we see a code violation, it's like -10 to the score or whatever. So the cluster analysis is actually good at teasing those things out, and we'll be able to see if it does that well or not. And that's how we're going to make decisions about what model is the right model to use when we're in that modeling phase. Sure. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Does a condemnation order from a local government correlate to this at all?
We don't have that in our data, but it's something we could definitely look at. Okay, that'd be great.
So yes, wow. I preface stated by saying I was also special assigned counsel between the support housing division with the violation. Two questions. One, picking up on one of Ian's comments with regards to kind of equitable
nature distribution. And please excuse my ignorance on this, but do you have any data as to typically code violations come in 3 flavors: minor misdemeanors, first degree misdemeanors, and then just administrative sanctions. Parsing that out, that can be really, really valuable data set.
Almost all administrative. What you're saying.
Really?
Yeah, probably almost all, maybe all, there's might be a few exceptions, but mostly things.
So there's no prosecution data at all.
The very small minority.
Okay. Well, never mind then.
Yeah, it's challenging.
So that's a separate conversation. All right. The rest of my comments not going to make any sense.
Okay. Yeah, we would love to be able to more refine the code violation data, but we're getting it across different municipalities that have different formats and things like that. So it's going to be challenging. Sure. Yeah, I take your point.
Those are
Yeah.
code violations, but the nature of the severity of the violation can differ dramatically.
Right. And that might be another thing that's more appropriate for the second phase, where we try and just find those most serious violations and make them points on top of the map or something else that you can see them, rather than, because we're not going to have them consistently for place to place to be able to tease those out. I think that's my guess. Yeah.
We can pull those out.
Okay.
Know why there's a code violation, or at least in Youngstown.
Youngstown. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and we'll look at some of the other places.
Siding or roof or something else.
Yeah, and we can try similar with the other places that we have it, and we'll look. I'll give it a shot. Was there another hand up here? No. Okay. So the next is the share of tax delinquent parcels. So this is taking those residential parcels and finding the share that are identified in the parcel file as tax delinquent. Yes.
So for this, oftentimes what we'll do is look at parcels where the delinquent tax is greater than the annual tax and there aren't any taxes being paid.
Okay.
As an indicator of abandonment and more so than just there's some delinquent amount on the property. Maybe somebody's paying the taxes now, or there's maybe a legacy of delinquency.
Right.
Yeah, I think you'll find that it's the vast majority, probably over 90%, that fall under that classification, where there's, yes, delinquent more than a year. It's,
right.
Yeah, because then it becomes tax foreclosure eligible.
Okay.
Nobody's paying on it, and that's percent taxes being paid, and that's a pretty good, not 100% indicator, but a pretty good indicator. There is a separate data set that shows whether or not there's a payment plan as for operating.
So is that something, I think the amount we can get out of the parcel file is the number of years unpaid, also something I can pull out of the parcel?
That doesn't really matter for what John's saying, it's just the amount versus the thankful tax.
Yeah, that we can figure out is more.
Yeah, and I think you guys probably have that.
Okay.
But there is another field in a different table that actually basically fits on it, that they're on some type of payment plan.
I see.
At least in Mahoning County.
Okay. I'll take a look, but I might have to follow up with you and make sure I'm running it the way that you're. Sounds good. Thanks. Yes.
Is this all parcels for tax delinquents or just the residential parcels?
Just residential, yeah. Yeah, almost everything that goes into the model is for residential. Sometimes we'll overlay land use if that's something that people are interested in, like the share at the block group level of the land use that's residential versus commercial or industrial, if that's effective.
Now, my question was just because I see one particular census tract I'm familiar with that has a lot of commercial business owners that have figured out how to play a tax game. It's obviously a little bit darker. I didn't know if that was maybe school related, but if it's only residential parcels.
Okay.
Did you want to share the information?
But yeah, there's a group of LLCs that happen to have similar ownership, family ownership, that own quite a bit of businesses. And they figured out they can go through the process because the state of Ohio has property owners, rights, and it favors property owners. They can go so far until they trigger foreclosure, then they can make a lump sum payment on their taxes, get onto a tax plan, make the first couple of payments, and then stop paying and restart the whole process before they become so delinquent that they have to make a lump sum. And so they're still hundreds of thousands of dollars behind, but they keep resetting their clock on foreclosure based on this game that them and their lawyer have figured out.
Have you considered use of payment?
That has been recommended to the municipality, and they have had minimal but some success where they've actually demolished one of the structures, put them in they're in court where they're being forced to bring 2 other structures up to standard and or be foreclosed on if they do not. So it has been a long process going through that, but that's 3 structures of, I personally know, 15. So, and like I said, they learned the game and they've gotten away with it for a very long time. And it takes even longer to go through court to get the little success that's been seen. But yeah.
So it sounds like we need some sort of standard on how many times somebody can get on a payment plan for their taxes.
Then that comes down to either county policy or state regulation, which, yeah, it could be, and that could be fought against because, you know, if I'm a homeowner and I miss one payment, you know, my 6 month, do I get on, you know, then you start talking about the intimacies of that, you know, does that screw a homeowner over more or less, or is there a loophole to that because it's privately owned? Is this only a commercial thing? That goes down a whole other rabbit hole. You know, not to disenfranchise the low and moderate income homeowners in our county.
That's a good question. Well, that's why sometimes it's nice to be in these rooms and people have ideas. You can connect.
So, I mean, that is largely a county policy issue. I mean, up in Cuyahoga, for example, you do have a payment plan, but it's basically one shot. There are some exemptions for owner occupants. I mean, you know, just as a matter of basic equitable principles, right? Things that are alike are treated alike, things that are different are treated differently. So, I mean, if you have an issue where you have, you know, elderly homeowner, for example, and, you know, because the payment plans are generally administered through the county treasurer's office, I mean, that's a conversation first and foremost with your county treasurer. But I think overall, when we talk about, you know, kind of more at a certain point, obviously, you know, if you have everything that you said, I absolutely hear, because I've seen a lot of those same things in my practice over the last decade. That I think what it really comes down to on that particular point is really looking at getting everyone to play nice with each other in the sandbox, because you have your local government and then you have your county government. And if they're not on the same page with this stuff, it's going to make a lot of the other stakeholders in the room, it's just going to make everyone's life a lot harder.
And it's not to complicate that anymore, but the county not only has to appease that one local government, for Trumbull County specifically, we have 24 townships and 11 municipalities. So now you have 36 local governments that you have to appease in making a county-wide policy, which is near impossible.
Sounds good. I'm going to turn back to the maps just to be conscious of everybody's time, but it sounds like you guys have like a whole side project you could do together. Which is great. Yeah. So this is vacant structures, which is coming from the great survey data from Youngstown State. The thing I think we wanted feedback from the group on this map is for these areas where we don't have the survey data, what might be a comparable measure that we could use to try and fill in some of these blight areas where you see we don't have data yet. I know in the cities that the Postal Service data is not too accurate. I wonder if maybe out in the other communities outside of the cities, if that looks better in those places, or if census might be something that we could compare to the vacant structures. Any ideas of other things to look at?
There is survey data for Boardman Township. It might be done that 5 years ago we did that. We have every parcel of Boardman.
Okay.
There is a township wide survey. We did go in, take hold of there.
Yeah.
I think it was
That'd be great.
2016. Yeah.
Okay,
That was
that'd be helpful.
thousands, I don't know if those was dollars.
Yeah, 2016, I'm not sure. I have to check on that to make sure that's, well, check on Boardman as well. I remember that was around the same time.
Something that was mentioned earlier, utilities.
Yeah, utility data.
The activation or for lack thereof.
Right.
We look at water data, yeah.
If you look at water shutoffs and tax delinquency,
Together.
almost a surefire vacancy.
Okay.
Awful lot.
Yeah, water. They might not have a water, right? That's gonna be in this.
The extent of first energy would ever give them that would be probably much better.
Okay. Yeah, we can reach out to them. Any other thoughts or anything on the map that looks surprising for the areas where you do see data represented?
It won't be nearly as complete as a neighborhood survey, but Austintown Township has a department that's more active since it's a larger township. And they're a little more able to do demolition of residential structures where needed. So you might get some count out of Austintown. There's a specific person I can recommend.
That would be great.
Contact, yeah.
That's sort of pending demolitions or a list of to be demolished?
Recently completed.
Recently
And
completed.
they would also have a nuisance list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
To use the water data, and found out that most of the areas in Trumbull County are some sort of county level system. And that data shows to be able to chop it up, because most of that now.
you. Okay, great. All right. That's very helpful. Any other thoughts about the vacant structures? No. Okay. And this is vacant land area. So this is parcels in the parcel file that are identified as vacant land. We take the area of those parcels and divide it by all residential parcels. Just give you a sense of how much of the land area is open and vacant.
This does exclude everything else.
Yeah, we're only using residential for our denominator there. Yeah. It's in the land use in the parcel file. So we're using that use.
Parcel. So that it's not like there's a house and someone has 2 parcels, we're calling one of those a vacant lot.
Yeah, that's a good question. We should definitely check out and see if there's side yards.
Historically, there were,
Yeah,
This was
you know,
county
there's
data.
sidewalks.
this is
out
county
there,
data, yeah.
historically, homes that were built across multiple parcels, like we own a house.
Right.
There's 3 parcels that are really part of one block, but 2 might come up. But it's always, since it was built in 1920s, it's always, if you look at it, one block, there's not like extra land there, if you're following what I'm saying.
Yeah, so we would look at sort of the next door parcels to see if they were owned by if there was an improvement next door and it's owned by the same person. We're not going to count that as a vacant lot. That's what you're saying. Yep, that
And when
makes
we
sense.
look at vacant land in different places, it's not per se a measure of distress. Right? There are also opportunities, there are sort of amenities in some instances, or where they become side yards, or they can be assembled into a little pocket park within a TV. So there are different ways for interpreting and what you do about and how you talk about what they do. Like, and that will probably vary in different parts.
On that same point, and I'm sure that this will probably be like a second layer question or comment, but are you looking as as you look at distress and vacancy, are you factoring in potential brownfield issues?
We're looking at just the residential area. Yeah. So that is something we have data from like EPA on brownfield Superfund sites, those things that we could overlay. So you could get like a distance to the closest Superfund or brownfield site.
And I guess that's kind of like part one of, I guess the second part is that, one of the things that has complicated redevelopment efforts, particularly if some villages in the southeast side of Cleveland, for example, was, known as the Iron Ward, highest concentration of steel mills and other things in the greater Cleveland area, were all centered on solid village communities. So one of the things that complicates urban development efforts and that, and honestly, the typography is very, being a son of the area, I just said, look, Slavic Village is basically Warren Youngstown condensed into 5 square miles. It's almost the exact same issue. Brownfields complicate redevelopment efforts because of, obviously, when you're looking for places to make those interventions, new development, are we looking at mixed grade, we're looking at affordable, et cetera, that having that as a factor might be something to factor in at some point.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely overlay it, and then I guess we could also try to create a measure for like the distance to those or something like that and see what that would look like. That'd be interesting. Okay. Any other thoughts on vacant land? So now we're getting into some of the different housing characteristics. This is residential density. So this is the number of housing units per residential acre. So the darker areas are going to be those where you're more likely to see multifamily buildings. And the lighter areas are going to be those where you see more large lots. Green is park space.
How does that correlate to commercial zone property? Does that just pull out? There's a higher grid that has just a little bit of residential, rest of the commercial.
We're just dividing it by things that have a residential use. So any commercial industrial is pulled out. So yeah, so it doesn't affect the density there. Yeah. Just to give you a sense of like, if you were walking down the street, would you expect to see single family homes, some multifamily? What's the mix in those places? So the next data set is one of the few where we're not using administrative data, which is the mix of owners and renters. And that's because when we were driving around, we saw that the homesteads didn't correlate well with home ownership, and now we know why, which is good. So this is something that we're using data from the American Community Survey, and generally we try to avoid that, but we think this is one of the better indicators because people obviously do know if they own or rent their home, unlike some other questions in the ACS, which are a little bit harder for people to understand. So we will be using probably ACS data at the block group level for this measure. Okay. Yeah, that would be great because
it's a mix of a few different sources, but it's primarily on understand. I have a methodology that I can share with
okay.
you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, literally 25 or 26 steps, but it's just basically going through it. It's count that is a likely homeowner or likely rental or neither.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great because the ACS data obviously has a big lag.
You'll never come back out.
That's fine. We're happy to do it. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, we're almost, this is the last map. So this is the share of subsidized renter households. And by renter subsidy, we generally mean things like tax credit development, public housing, all the different ways that generally HUD is subsidizing the rental market. We use this as a measure often for where renters are a little bit more stabilized because they're probably paying less of their income than they might be if they had a private market rental, and they have some protections in subsidized units that they don't have in the private market. So we have housing choice vouchers for Mahoning from Youngstown, and we're working on getting them from Trumbull, because that's the last missing part there, I think, which is nice to know, because then you can see where people are using vouchers. Sometimes we'll put the location of all the built projects, and then you can put a sort of a dot density where the housing choice vouchers are, which gives you a sense of, are people actually using the vouchers the way they're designed to be used to access different areas within different markets, or are they just sort of falling close to those built areas and ending up being right back in the areas they would have been if they didn't have a voucher?
When you get Trumbull data, would you be able to do two maps? One with basically showing just like the section it's got its like one showing the traditional.
Yeah, we can do those as two maps, or the way we sort of do it in one map is we'll size the dots for the built projects by the number of units, and then we'll sort of dot density the housing choice vouchers so you can see where they're sort of scattered in different areas. But we can do it separately too. It's separate.
Are you also looking at homeless vouchers for the continuing repair for permanent supportive housing?
We don't have that data, but if that's available.
The housing inventory count.
Okay.
For the continuum.
Okay.
So we might be able to access that in those.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, and so we talked about some of the changes that we'll make to the study area, and when we send out that ARC Online map, we'll be able to have started making some of those changes already. If you have any other thoughts about that before we send that map out, that would be great. We can incorporate them now. If not, we'll have a chance to comment on those a little later. So that's where we are so far. Thanks for all your feedback. We have a pretty long set of next steps that we're working on based on your feedback today and all the things we've been learning from driving around and all the benefit of driving with people that know the area so well. And those include some of the things we talked about, filling in some of those gaps in the permits and code violation data, looking into some of that utility data and some of the other measures that we talked about, like flipping, investor ownership. One thing we didn't talk about yet is that we do this analysis at the census block group, because that's about as refined as a geography as you can use and still have some statistical stability. But when we were driving around yesterday, we saw that there are some census block groups that are essentially averaging over two very different areas that are, you go from one block to the next and you're in a totally different type of housing market. And so in those places, we will go into our GIS system and split those areas along a road or something like that. That's a good dividing line, as long as we have enough sales that we can still categorize that. So that's going to be another part of the next set of GIS activities that we're going to do.
Just a thought, when you do the foreclosure data, if you're able to pull it for like tax foreclosure separate, and then also this is you're able to get share of sale results, that would be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Making it through share of sale and what's just.
That we can definitely do. I know we can get this individual, pull the sheriff's results online. The mortgage foreclosure we're still working on. We're trying to scrape the website because we don't have, if anyone has a contact with the courts and wants to save me a lot of scraping work, I really appreciate it. But absent that, we will collect the foreclosures from the court. Yeah.
This is, once we run out of time, but are there other variables? So in the MBA, like having done similar things before, and I don't know if you guys know Alan Malik, he would tell us to also look at things like sales ratio, mortgage ratio, some of these other factors that when we're looking at, is there even any market to begin with? Or is there any type of data like that goes into the model, or is it just the items that you just went through with us? Is there other data going in?
So those are the main set of things that will go into the model itself. We'll do a mortgage analysis with data. It's called Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. That's at the census tract level, so it's one unit bigger than the block group. But we'll align those with the MVA categories and give you a sense of one of the things you said, the sales ratio. So how many transactions were actually mortgage transactions versus cash transactions, which also often correlates well with where they're investor owners who are doing those cash purchases. What are the denial rates? in areas, we'll do that also by like race and ethnicity. So you can see, are there gaps in fair housing issues from the mortgage analysis? So those kind of things will be part of that overlay step after we've tightened up the model, just because the model is at more refined geography than the mortgage data comes. So we did that. But there are other things that you're thinking about, and we're happy to think about some other set of variables. That's great. We're also going to be doing a separate MBA for the non-urbanized parts of the counties, but that'll be at the census tract level, and that I think we'll talk about at a later meeting. The next time we travel here, we're going to try and do all these data pieces by sometime in January, and we really welcome anyone from this group who wants to drive around with us and see the data on the ground and see what the conditions look like and how they line up with the data, or just give us the benefit of your experience of the area. It's really beneficial for us, and it's kind of fun. Like, it's pretty fun, right? Yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah, so. No worries.
Outside of those boundaries?
Yeah.
What about areas that are urbanized but aren't part of that contiguous boundary?
It's going to be part of like the rest of the two county region. So we've done similar things, city of Pittsburgh and then the rest of Allegheny County, or city of Wilmington, and then the rest of the state of Delaware. And so the methodology will be comparable, but it'll be different. Because the data points will come through, the data that we have available is different. We can't collect all the data that we're getting for the urbanized area for 36 municipalities in Trumbull County and the number of units in Mahoning County. We're getting like a scale that is unwieldy for us to do it. But we'll create a typology for the rest of the county that will be, functionally high, medium, and low, right? In terms of strong, middle, distress, to help sort of think about these parts outside of the urbanized area and what their relationship is to one another. But there's also a lot of empty space, right? In some of those. It'll be important to have density overlays, and population overlays, and where there's just not a population.
So like in Trumbull County in particular, maybe every area really belongs to Pennsylvania. But it is a significant area getting a lot of issues. They have a lot of urban related issues, even though they're not, they're just a country.
Yeah.
If they get left in the dust a lot, we don't really end up with data to support things that we need to do in that community, and so that would be just the advocating.
Well, and so one of the things that we've done in the past, we'll come up with a methodology for the rest of the two county area, but if there are select municipalities that are able to provide us with additional data, we can do little zoom into those places that have overlays of their local data on top of what we're able to do for everybody else, to provide those places with a little bit more nuance if they're able to provide for the records. So that is the sort of thing we're more than happy to do.
Yeah.
Just a closing comment. As a business owner, I'm just very surprised and taken aback that the Trumbull county seat city has been relatively uncooperative, not present here today. I would say that anybody and everybody in this room, any organization that needs to reach out to the city. If we get all this data and it doesn't include Warren, I think the NBA is incomplete. And it's just me shocking.
Yeah. We will definitely reach out many more times. Do our best to get them. Okay, so yeah, the next step will be coming back in January to drive around, and then hopefully we'll reconvene everybody online probably next time in February. We'll have hopefully some draft models that we can show you to get a sense of what those look like. So thank you everybody for hanging in with us today and going through many maps, and for all your feedback. We really appreciate your time.
And be on the lookout in the next week or so with a link to the ARC online maps. Right? So that will give you a chance to provide feedback both on the urbanized area and then for each of these indicators, where you can give us feedback on the reliability or questions that you have, or places we need to make sure we validate the next time we're out here.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
I know.